Hi everybody, this is Laura, City Scrapper. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel. Today I have a layout that I made for Shimmerz Paints. In this layout, I use a number of papers from the September color kit. I love this very bold sun. I cut out the center of it, and I'll return to that in a little while. And then I fussy cut out a section of another pattern paper. The pink color that you see on the florals, that was already there, and now I'm using some of my Shimmerz paints and I'm going to add to the color that came on the paper. The Shimmerz papers seem to be designed to take paint really well, so I was able to use a whole variety of different Shimmerz paints on this surface. Right now I'm using a spritz called Bamboo Leaf. I'm not only painting the leaves that are white, but I'm also painting some of the leaves that have some pink on them. I found this very relaxing. I just thought it was really fun to paint all of the sections in. For the green leaves, I'm trying to put a little bit more green on some of those areas, like some of the lines. I put a few more coats of paint so that some would look a little darker and some would look a little lighter, just to make them look a little bit more interesting. Then I moved on to the flowers. I'm using the Shimmerz Marigold color. I love this color paint. I use it so often. I actually have to order another one because I have almost used the whole thing up at this point. The marigold color is a Shimmerz, and they really live up to their name. They are quite shimmery and they have quite a nice sheen to them. On both sides of these flowers, there are clusters of small flowers, and you can see that I didn't fussy cut them all the way out. I wanted to paint them first, allow them to dry, and then cut them out, because I thought if they were already cut out, they might be a little more difficult to paint. But I used the marigold to paint those smaller flowers. And now I'm using some Color Splash spray. This color is called Squeeze the Day. And it's nice the way there's a little hint of pink already on these two flowers that I'm painting yellow. So there's a lot of variation just from adding a little bit of yellow on top of the little bit of pink that's already there. I'm using the Spritz Bamboo Leaf again to add a little color to the leaves that are behind these large flowers. I just love the tropical vibe, not just of this particular piece of paper, but of this whole collection. I very rarely go to tropical places, and the photo I'm going to use for this layout is of Cape Cod. However, I don't mind using any papers or embellishments that look tropical on a beach-themed layout. As I'm painting some areas, the other areas are drying, and then once certain areas are dried, I go back in and add a little bit more paint. I like the idea of adding some layers of paint. I always think that that makes it look a little bit more interesting. There are quite a few black lines that divide the leaves and the flowers into sections, so I try to put a little bit more paint in some of the lines than in others, and I think that just gives it a little bit of dimension. I brought a little bit of the Shimmerz Marigold and also the Color Splash Squeeze the Day over to those pink flowers. At first I was just going to leave them the color that they were, but then I was thinking that it would help to tie the whole unit together by adding some of those colors into the pink areas, and I also think that it made some of the flowers look a little bit more dimensional and more interesting. And now I'm adding yet another layer of green paint to those leaves. As I had mentioned, I found this to be very fun and it was relaxing, so I just kept going with it, adding more layers and just kind of enjoying myself. I wanted to have some flowers at the top of the layout, so I fussy cut these pieces out from another pattern paper that I had used some of on another layout. For these flowers, I again used the Color Splash Squeeze the Day, but I also wanted to use a pink color to tie these flowers together with the flowers at the bottom of the page. So I used the Color Splash Flashy Flamingo spray to add some pink to the center of this flower and the centers of the other flowers, which I'm going to start painting in a little while. And then, of course, I brought in some of the Shimmerz Marigold color, and I added that to all of these yellow petals. Once again, I think that it helped to tie the different flowers together. To try to give these flower petals a look of having some dimension, I added the marigold to some of the lines a little bit more in some areas than others, so it would look a little bit more natural. I also added a little bit more marigold toward the base of each of the petals because there would be a shadow at the base of the petal from the petal on top of it. And I always find that when I look at actual flowers, there is a little bit of a darker look at the base, and then the edges of the flowers look a little bit lighter. So I try to mirror that in my painting. I'm going to be placing these loose flowers in the two top corners of my layout. For the right-hand corner, I'm going to use these two flowers. They are layered on top of each other, and I painted it in the same way, starting out with the Color Splash Squeeze the Day, and then using the Shimmerz Marigold on top of it, along with the Color Splash in Flashy Flamingo. And I continued painting until I had built up the layers of color as I had with the other flower. Now I'm ready to start assembling my layout. I did a whole bunch of stitching on the paper with the large sun on it. I used yellow, light pink, dark pink, and orange embroidery thread, and I stitched all around the circle in the center and then around each of the rays of the sun. I put some ATG adhesive on the back of the flowers, and then I'm pressing it into place. And then I do the same thing with those two smaller flowers that I had painted, one going in each of the two corners. And in case you're wondering, I am working on a chessboard. I picked it up at a local Goodwill, and I thought that it was the perfect size and surface to use for my scrapbooking. I wanted to add something on top of the photo, and I had these two butterflies. They were in the center of the piece of paper I cut out from the sun paper, so I fussy cut both of them out to color the butterflies in. I'm using some of the Color Splash sprays again. I'm using Squeeze the Day. I'm using Flashy Flamingo, and I also use a lighter pink color called Pinking of You. Just like with the flowers, I'm building up the color, adding a couple of layers of all of these colors and mixing them together just slightly so that it doesn't look too much like a coloring book, so that there's a little bit of variation in the colors. I made them kind of opposites of each other. One is pink with a little bit of yellow, one's yellow with a little bit of pink, and I think they'll go really well with the flowers. I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do for the inside area of the sun. I was thinking of using a piece of pattern paper, but I couldn't find just the right color, so I decided that I would use my Shimmerz paints and some modeling paste and create a background for my photo. I cut a circle out of some thick white cardstock. I'm using a Vicki Boutin stencil, and I'm using some modeling paste. I want the modeling paste to cover the entire circle, but as you can see, the stencil is just a little bit smaller than that circle, so I use my heat tool. I make sure the modeling paste is dry. Then I bring the stencil back in, add a little bit more modeling paste, and then the whole circle is covered. Sometimes I'm a little too anxious and I don't dry the first application before adding another one, and it usually works out fine. You just have to be a little bit careful that your stencil doesn't cause the modeling paste you already put down to get smudged. Drying it in between is definitely the safest way to go, and it's very good when you want to make sure that an intricate pattern doesn't get smudged. The modeling paste is dry, and now I'm going to add some color to this circle. I start off with the Color Splash in Squeeze the Day. Once again, it's a very handy color. I put some on a piece of plastic to do the packaging technique. I add a little bit of water to it, and then if you look here, I had a little accident, but luckily I poured the paint right on a piece of plastic. I was able to pour it back in and then continue right on with the packaging technique. Here I'm using my heat tool to dry the first layer of color. And now I'm adding another Shimmerz. This one is called Golden Wheat. This is another one of my favorite colors that I'm going to have to reorder because I use it so frequently. I once again use the packaging technique. The Shimmerz is a little bit of a thicker paint than the Color Splash spray, so I add a little bit more water to that to help the color move around. And then I began using my paintbrush to help spread the color exactly where I wanted it to go. Those big dots that I made with the modeling paste made it a little bit hard to move the paint, so the paintbrush worked a little bit better. Now I'm adding some more of the Shimmerz marigold. This just kind of makes the whole circle come to life, I thought, and made it look a little bit more like the sun. I knew that I was going to layer my photo on top of this circle, so I wanted to make sure that the edges looked interesting, and I wanted to put a little bit of extra color there. I used my heat tool to begin drying it, but kept right on applying color even as I was drying the background. I already did a little bit of assembling, but I'm going to continue putting the layout together. I have this piece of cardstock that I'm going to use to mount both the pattern paper background and the circle that I just completed. As I was assembling these pieces, I realized that the stitching that I had done on the pattern paper gave a little bit of dimension to that background paper. So the paper was lifted a little bit up off of the blue paper. So I was thinking that if I put some foam right behind the area where the circle was cut out of, that would give me a surface on which to mount the circle that I just made. Otherwise, it wasn't touching the blue paper. I hope that that makes sense. So the foam ended up working just fine. I tucked it, like I said, behind that circle. Then I added some ATG adhesive to the mixed media circle. And now that circle has a surface to attach to. Now it's time to bring in my photo. This is a photo of my daughters, Danielle and Julia, enjoying a day on the beach at Cape Cod. I mounted this photo on some white cardstock and then again on some black cardstock. I thought since there were so many elements on the page that were black that I had to put black behind the photo to draw attention to it. I didn't want another area of the page to be more prominent. Now I'm using that same foam. This is fun foam with adhesive on one side to pop up the wings of both of the butterflies. I place both of the butterflies at the top of the photo. I think that those butterflies are necessary to balance out the layout because there's that gap between the flowers at the top of the page. And although the butterflies aren't at the top of the page, it just seemed to fill in a space that seems a little bit empty. There was one area in the flower that didn't have a black border, so I used a Sharpie to add that border in. I'm trying to adapt this flower to the spot it's in. It's a little bit of a different shape than what it looked like originally, and I thought I needed one more petal, so I fussy cut out one more petal and placed that on the left-hand side of the flower. And now I'm going to create some photo corners. I'm using this sheet that has all these beautiful butterflies on it. I loved this color pink that some of the butterflies were. So for those half butterflies that I couldn't fussy cut out anyway, I used my corner punch and I punched out some photo corners. I think that that pink color was the perfect color for the photo corners. I used some ATG adhesive. I attached all of the corners down, and then I began adding some jewels. My camera didn't record all of it, but you could see that I am using some yellow jewels of different sizes and slightly different colors, and I'm placing them on all of those rays of the sun. And then I also added some black jewels. I added black jewels to the photo corners, and I also add some to the centers of the butterflies. All of the jewels are pretty small, but I use slightly larger ones for the photo corners, and I reserve the smallest ones for the centers of the butterflies. I find small scissors very helpful for getting those jewels in just the right spot. I added one of the dots from the kit. This one says hi. It serves as my title. This layout is complete, and here are some close-ups. I had a lot of fun making this layout, and I hope that you enjoyed this video. When you place a Shimmerz order, please use my name in the comments box and you'll receive a free gift. This color kit is still available as of right now when this video comes out, and it's a really beautiful one. You might want to check it out. The link to the Shimmerz website is in the description box. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I hope to see you all again soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.